it's great to be in Hamburg, and just to add on that, I used to be the Chief Technology and Digital Innovation Officer for the city of Barcelona for 4 years. I'm now the President of the Italian National Innovation Fund, and I work for Ursula von der Leyen on the Green Deal. But yes, I'm engaged with the United Nations also to develop digital cities further, and working with the city of Hamburg, by the way, on a project I will also talk about. So I have this hard task to move from this military setting where we are all immersed in this very, very difficult time and kind of portray a vision of the future that's much more, I guess, positive. So I think it is a hard task today to actually, because we live in this new normal, where we have a continuous of sudden shocks that are changing the world. We've been 3 years immersed in a healthcare crisis that gave rise to an economic and social crisis, and we are in the middle of an energy shock, which is geopolitically induced, of course, for the war in Russia. And we have economic upheaval, the climate catastrophe, massive immigration. I think if we go outside, people are more worried about how they're going to pay their bills, their energy bills, and inflation going up of 10%. So I think we are in a very particular structural change, continuous crisis. And I think those are the moments where we have to be able to say that we can redesign the economy and society for the future. So that's where we have to say the status quo is not working at the moment, so how do we mobilize our intelligence to actually design a new society that's radically different? When we look at digitization, and we know this through the pandemic, I think we had a rapid and massive, fast change with digitization. So today we're all talking about smart working, distance education, digital healthcare, like we're all using digital tools more and more to communicate and to do everything. But we also know that this rapid change in society, so this is not just the gigs anymore, everybody's talking about how digital is transforming society, but this is of course giving us a lot of opportunities, in particular for your industry, but also a lot of challenges. And we know that there is going to be a massive shift in power also with robotization, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, automation of a lot of industries and societies. And I think we have to be clear here that accelerating the speed of digitization is not enough. We have to give it a direction. We have to give it a vision. And that vision is to couple the digital with environmental and social sustainability. And how do we do that? And also, how do we make sure that the shift in power, in particular towards the big tech, it's not harming society? And we have to basically be clear on how we're going to reach this goal. If we look at what Europe is doing, I'm talking a little bit from a policy angle here, I think we have been pretty powerful acting together during the pandemic. Let's think about the vaccine procurement. We pull it together in Europe, and then we also transfer technology in the developing country globally. We are now working intensively on a joint energy policy, also to cap the price on gas, and maybe to tax the profit of the big energy companies, and this is absolutely critical to stay safe and warm in the winter and to do our transition toward green energy, so the green transition. And now Europe is investing, it has been investing around 3 trillion actually euros, but let's say 700 billion euros in the Next Generation EU, which is the digital plan to face those two transitions, the green transition, the ecological transition, so really do something. It's an action plan to stop climate change and the climate catastrophe on one side and transition to renewable energy, and the other side, digital. So digitization, the digital transition. And those two transitions are very linked. So how do we put the digital at the service of the green transition and of people? How do we transform society and cities? So I think this vision of Europe to become the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, to become more sustainable, move towards a circular economy, being fully digital and democratic, how do we reach it? This is not going to be just EU regulations set in Brussels. It's not going to be only financial standards. It has to be a movement. And this movement should start people first. And this is, I think, for me, very important to say, not a technological solutionism. This is not going to be about more technology. This is going to be about people first. And that's why I like cities. That's why I've been working a lot with cities, with the city of Barcelona for 4 years, but now with the United Nations and many other cities around the world. Because in cities we have, first of all, the big task to redefine this question, this concept of the smart city, and redefining the relationship between technology, communities, and the environment. How do we make digital transformation work for the people, to transform their daily life, to transform things that they need? I don't think we should start from technology to see the latest, connectivity, 5G, blockchain, crypto, or whatever. I think we should start from the real problems we want to tackle, which is, of course, reducing inequalities, affordable housing. How do we move to a sustainable healthcare, sustainable and safe mobility, electric mobility, connected mobility, the ecological transition? How do we create more public spaces, more green spaces, more spaces for bicycles, for example, and integrated public transport? How do we reduce carbon emission radically? So those are the challenges we need to tackle. And then we can say, how do we use technology, artificial intelligence, data, and platforms to achieve us reaching and tackling those goals? So not, tech first, top-down tech first, but bottom-up, people first, starting from their daily problems. At the end, for whom are we building those cities? What does it mean to be smart? For whom are we building that? I think cities are really leading the way when we are talking about the green transition. When you want to see concrete projects to move towards net zero, to reduce carbon emission, climate change, you have to look at cities. There is a network which is called C40. It was promoted by Bloomberg and when he was the mayor of New York. And now there are tons of cities all around the world that are comparing, use cases and projects that are really trying to make their cities greener. So this example is the Barcelona example. When I used to work in Barcelona, we started a project where we decided to remove the cars from the city center. And this is a massive, of course, new urban planning, where we are defining the objective of lowering CO2 emissions, but also really redefining mobility in the city. And now there are 16 districts in Barcelona where you cannot enter with your car, so you can only, it's called the Barcelona SUPERBLOCKS, Superilla in Spanish, and the cars can only get around the block, but they cannot enter the city center. In this way, we've recuperated 60% of the public space that today is green areas and areas that are not occupied by cars, but where you have, new kind of local businesses, social activities, and much more green areas, and of course spaces for micro-mobility operators. I know this is a hard topic in Germany, so if I go, I know because I'm working with the city of Germany, if you go to German cities and you say, we're going to remove the cars from the city centers, it's like, wow, this is a revolution. But many cities are doing that. This is not only Barcelona, there is Madrid, Milan. Of course, in Paris, they popularized the idea of the 15-minute cities, where they're saying cities should be proximity, where citizens can get access to basic services within 15 minutes. Imagine, this is a big challenge for a big city like Paris. So you should have access to your hospital, to your school, to your basic facilities within 15 minutes, so you don't need to commute. So these 100 climate neutral cities experimenting, think about also moving towards energy transition, creating more solar panels in cities, reducing carbon emissions, creating smart grid to redistribute energy, and sustainable mobility. Lots of things are happening. When we talk also about citizen participation, when I was in Barcelona, we have done something pretty ambitious. So we involved 400,000 citizens in shaping the city agenda. I know that this question of how do we get citizens to participate, it's very important in cities. And we managed to get those citizens involved in a hybrid process of participatory democracy, not only digital, but also offline in the streets. We have engaged in citizen assemblies and decision-making process in a participatory way. The result was that 60% of the action plan of the city of Barcelona was created directly from citizens. So we had a lot of proposals, of course, with a big committee, and this isn't about, replacing democracy with Facebook, yeah? When you hear, what is digital democracy? Yes, just click here and you will solve the world. No, that's not about that. This is hybrid new participatory democracy form where citizens are engaged via digital platforms, but also in their neighborhood, and we devolve more power to the citizens in taking decisions about how they want to shape the future city. And I can tell you, it works. I mean, it's difficult, you need to participate, but at the end, if you have a vision, for example, removing the cars from the city center, and you engage citizens, residents, taxi drivers, businesses, and you do it in a participatory way, this is going to work in the future. And that's how we need to implement this big planning. Now, I was asked to also talk a little bit about data. When we are talking about a smart city, at the end is a digital connected city with lots of sensors, with connectivity. All the time we use our mobile phone. I'm not going to explain this to you. We produce a lot of data. I'm an innovation economist, and we know that data is the raw material of the digital economy. And we also know that, this is a valuable asset, but it's mainly about how you're using this data, how you consume artificial intelligence system, how you create a predictive modeling, how you're able to take the best out of data. But the economic value of data is estimated by the European Commission about 830 billion by 2025. So Tim Cook has defined the data industrial complex, the big tech. So how can we not only make data a commodity that can be exploited by the big tech companies, but how can we make sure that data can become actually a public good for society? How we can use data to tackle all the problems I've been talking about before. Many economists are saying we live in a data extractivism. So, of course, the metaphor is with oil. We are extracting data, which is the raw material. We are refining data, but only a few companies, yes, these are the big tech in Silicon Valley, and the Chinese big tech companies are really able to use all this data, of course, acquiring a lot of startups, and to create extra profits with this data. And this is my friend, professor, I'm sure you know her, Shoshana Zuboff at Harvard Business School. She wrote a book that's called Surveillance Capitalism. And it's pretty good to read to understand how the digital economy works. And she says, under surveillance capitalism, you are not the customer or even the product. You are the raw material. Of course, about predicting behavior and controlling and tracking users. We know that a lot of money is made by manipulation and monetization of personal information and data. But how can we move towards a model that's more sustainable, preserving information self-determination, the autonomy of people, their digital rights, but also making value out of data to tackle the big societal challenges? For example, now a lot of institutions and a lot of organizations are using algorithmic and data-driven regulation to control platforms. For example, take Airbnb or Uber. If I don't know what's inside the black box, and I don't know how those algorithms affect the price of housing or even the laws that determine your contract as a gig worker, how am I going to make sure that if you work for a platform, if you are a digital worker, you have your rights as a worker? How am I going to make sure that the price of housing, if I have a lot of Airbnb in my city, don't go skyrocketing, and then people are evicted from their homes? So how do I regulate those platforms? Yes, I do need access to actually this information and data, and see that algorithms are transparent and accountable. And this is a lot about the European regulation, but also nation states are doing a lot to make that possible. So when I was in Barcelona, this was 2012, so long time ago when we started to work on this project, and we started experimenting with distributed ledger technology and strong cryptography to preserve the right to data of people. So we started an experiment. This was like when blockchain and Bitcoin even wasn't that popular, but the blockchain as an infrastructure was not popular as it is today. And then we created a large-scale decentralized and privacy-enhancing infrastructure with a cryptographic algorithm. The team that created this project was then took from Facebook to Palo Alto to build the first digital currency. So this is a question about, how do we retain talents here in Europe? Because when we have good projects and good, of course, talented developers, we know that the market is very competitive. Anyways, we created those tools because in the future, we think that data, of course, now with Web3, many people talk about that, like disrupting the data economy. But anyways, we were sure, and this is now happening with the Data Act at European level, that the future is not big tech or big state, the data being kept by the big tech companies or by the state, but is a more decentralized and democratic data governance model. And so we think that citizens should be in control of whether they want to keep the personal information private, strong cryptography, control of data, with whom they want to share it, and on what terms and conditions. And so we create what we call a new pact on data. Now, in cities, this is very important because I have my Internet of Things infrastructure, pervasive sensor network in the city, and then I have more and more new connectivity, like the 5G experiments and so on. And so, for example, this is again the Barcelona model. I have my data ontology, and then my data lake, and then I can use all kinds of sensors coming from the street to do energy monitor, noise monitoring, garbage collection, the parking, the water metering, and then making sure that maybe with a big data analytics office or in partnership with data companies, I can use this data to create better services for the citizens. And that's like a little bit the model that we were proposing and became part of this coalition of citizens for digital rights, which is data and artificial intelligence as a common good, as a city infrastructure that can be shared and mobilized to tackle, mobility, climate, housing. This seems obvious, but it's not, because, we don't know how to use data in the best possible way, and then the data we use, we can mobilize it and use it very well to create value-added services, protecting also the privacy and the rights of the citizens. So is then a move towards a more fair data economy model? That's what the European Union is trying to do, proposing a European data trust model. So, for example, how I can partner between the business and the private and the public sector, but also, getting more trust from the citizens when they share their data, and then create a data governance model that's based on consent, on interoperability, and on data portability. So that, yes, citizens are more in charge, they're more in control, and they take decisions about how they share their data. And the models are out there. Of course, you can check the literature, you can do a data trust, you can do a data cooperative, you can work on personal data sovereignty. For example, that's how the Web3 people talk about it. Or you can do data sharing pools, like they're doing, for example, in the data spaces with the automotive sector. Yeah, everybody's trying to see, that's mainly business-to-business data exchanges, how we can make sure that we can get, share data for the public interest, and I say not only to create profits for very few companies, but to create public value. We are doing an experiment that's very cool, I think, here in Hamburg, which is about data sharing for micromobility. So we are looking, we are inviting micromobility operators, and we are entering into a data trust agreement with the city of Hamburg to develop the future governance model for the city of Hamburg related to data. And I think this is going to be very exciting. We are at the beginning. We're going to also do an open challenge where we're going to invite startups and innovators to participate and help us solve the challenge of integrating the data better, of sharing data in a governance model where you don't lose your competitive advantage, of course, with the data, but at the same time, you can transfer in a safe way the data, govern it collectively, also with the government, so that they can use it for better regulation, better decision-making, and open it to third parties with a common API and SDK and, access to data on fair terms. And this is going to be very important in the future. Otherwise, the data marketplace will be, again, a monopoly. Sorry to give you the bad news. So we can also, try to make sure that with data, we can really use it to tackle net zero and to have more democratic participation, and so to make sure that our cities are greener and better for the future. And this is what I talked about before, that there is a network of cities that are coming together under the United Nations. And I would say, I think that cities can do this very well because they are very practical in doing their technology projects, managing the infrastructure, opening it up for startups and innovators, but at the same time preserving the digital rights of citizens. And when we talk about digital rights, are the rights of our future. So universal and equal access to the internet, digital literacy, privacy, data protection and security and portability, transparency and accountability of algorithms, participatory democracy and inclusion, and moving towards open and ethical digital service standards. And that's also a way where, you know, what we do in government, using taxpayers' money, so it's your money, it can be also, you know, more collaborative, and not only working with the big companies that can access public procurement, but also with the innovators and the ecosystem of startups. Now, I think this vision about what cities can do with the green transition, ecological transition, using data and technology for the environment and for people, it's a positive vision. It's something that's happening from the ground up. But I think the objective here is to show that the future of digital is not only what they tell us. You have one model, it's the big tech, surveillance capitalism, Silicon Valley, they are going to manage everything in the future, or the big state, digital authoritarianism, like the Chinese model or the Russian model. Is there a third way? And I think, yes, Europe is positioned in a way, and I know you will maybe argue, we are lagging behind, we don't have our tech champions, we don't have this and that, but we are creating a big framework, which is a constitutional, our constitution for the digital age with all the regulation. You may not like it, but if they work and they're more simple, we have a new model of innovation that is also good for us as people, as humans, and they don't create monopolies, Digital Service Act, Digital Market Act, and so on. And then we are investing a lot of billions, as I told you before, in 5G, supercomputing, quantum, cybersecurity to create the deep tech champions in Europe as well. I mean, before they talked about a fund with NATO. The European Union is also doing a VC fund. As you know, there are VC, like the VC market is growing in Europe, so we can have also scale-ups, European scale-ups and deep tech champions that can, grow companies. I don't even like to talk about startups. Good companies that can grow and can be sustainable and can compete on the value chains of the future. So the model should be the one of proposing a digital humanism, a humanism for the digital age, where we guarantee the strategic autonomy and competitiveness of the European industry, but at the same time promote the democratic participation of citizens, protect the environment, our data, and the rights of people and workers, of course. And this is a new social contract. It's the new social contract of the digital age. And digital sovereignty in this context means that as a society, we should set the direction of technological progress, putting technology exactly at the service of the big transition we want to achieve. And I will end by saying I now work as an advisor for Ursula von der Leyen in a project that's called the New European Bauhaus. And it's super exciting because what the Bauhaus did, I'm not going to tell you, in Germany, in a very difficult time between the two world wars, was to try to create a multidisciplinary movement of artists and performance artists and architects and ecologists to lay the foundation of modernism. And what we want to do today to achieve the Green Deal is to create an interdisciplinary cultural movement that brings together architects, planners, science, technology, and the arts to achieve this vision of the Green Deal. What is a climate-neutral, sustainable Europe of the future? So I think this is a very exciting project, and this started 2 years ago and is ongoing. And this is really for creative people to be part of this big task of setting the challenge of our future and redesigning it together. Thank you.
Wow, Francesca. Breathtaking. Francesca, we've got just a little bit of time, but that's breathtaking. I feel like I could trust you if I said tomorrow, okay, just go and get it done. Like you would just run 1,000 miles an hour, you get everything done, talk to everybody. So really, wonderful, lots of information. Thank you very much. Just briefly, you talked quite a bit about the benefits of including people in participatory democracy and in shaping our cities. Does that mean, do they also get the opportunity to decide how money is spent?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, I will insist on this point, you know, because we give for granted our democracy many times, and we think, you know, we live in Europe, we have democracy at the core. I mean, human rights, democracy, our, you know, liberal societies are there, and they're there for the people. But I think at the moment, this model is threatened by, you know, autocracies, and also by right-wing nationalists and populism, which is again emerging in Europe. And we want to make sure this is not happening. And to me, the answer to people that are disenfranchised, they don't go to vote, they don't have hopes in the future, they don't believe that our institutions can make a change, it's more democracy, not less democracy, not moving to authoritarian model, but engaging people in decision-making. And I think it makes sense on the ground, close to your problems. Yeah. And yes, we did, I mean, participatory budgeting is a big part of the experiment. For example, in the city of Paris, there were 100 million spent in a participatory budgeting way.
Does
so
that
people
mean literally,
can
yeah,
literally
allocating
you
a
open
budget?
up a part of your city budget,
and you
involve
decide.
people and communities decide, and then you have a panel that chooses the proposal, and you can vote on the proposals.
And the panel is made up of ordinary citizens?
Ordinary citizens, yes.
Wonderful.
And those are experiments of participatory democracy are now happening, for example, for climate, to decide, because we know we have strong climate movements, but what are the actions? What are we going to do about it? It's time we talk about what we are doing, and not so much we know the problem, we have the science, what we are doing. And involving communities, young people, citizens, and so on, in the solution, it's what we need.
Yep.
And that will hopefully transform our democratic institutions to make them more tailored to the 21st century, more open, and more, you know, participatory.
Oh, wonderful. That is a battle cry for something, for very optimistic, beautiful things on the horizon. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Francesca.
thank you.